Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Path to Play. It is Rory.
And Valentina.
We are going on to part 3 of ID camps. There's a lot of talk about here, so we're bringing in a very important and valuable perspective for you guys. But before we dig into that, we're going to start it off a little more lighthearted with a college recruitment memory from Valentina.
Yes, so obviously there is a lot to say and reflect on from our ID Camp mini series. So we dug up a lot of our archives and I found a very memorable email that I sent out to a college coach. This was 2015, actually the night before my birthday, and I had sent this in prep for a tournament that my team and I were going to. So I'm just going to read one portion of it. And this is really just to give you an example of what an almost 15-year-old would write to a college coach doing the best that I could. All right. So I said, quote, as mentioned previously, I play for Arizona Arsenal Soccer Club on the O1 Premier Teal team. We are a U15 top tier team in the National Premier League and Far West League. My main positions are center mid, and outside defense. However, I am able to play anywhere else on the field with no problem. I have included the link of our tournament schedule in case you were able to attend any of my games. My jersey number is number 4. I wear white cleats and I am not very tall. I'd also like to add that our team carries a 20-person roster. Therefore, 2 of our players have to sit out for every game. If you have any questions or concerns, my coaches and assistant coaches information is on here too. End quote. So clearly, nobody peer reviewed my description of myself and taught me how to sell myself.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
think adding in that you're not very tall is super vital there.
yeah, when we found that email, we were laughing pretty hard because there were a decent amount of emails that were okay, especially as I personally got older. I kind of nailed it towards the end, but that one I clearly was very new to the
Yeah, that
process.
was an early one. I also definitely had a lot of typos, so someone proofreading mine probably would have been a good call.
Yeah, I think I could foresee that being a very useful position for someone to have for high school potential recruits around that
Oh
age.
yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that amazing
Of
story.
course. Of course, I'm
Moving
sure I have
on.
more.
Moving on, we will be talking about 3 questions that we asked a former coach of Valentina's.
Yes. So, for anyone who doesn't know, these questions were answered by Seattle University's very own assistant coach. His name is Chris Wells. He was my coach when I was still at Seattle University because I played defense for school, and he was very much dedicated to the defense side of the game. And Chris was a fabulous coach. I cannot thank him enough for all of his support throughout the years. And now I am very much pestering him with all of my questions related to soccer and college recruitment and everything under the sun that Rory and I can't possibly answer by ourselves. So I'm not going to give his full intro. That's just a soft introduction because we will definitely have him on the podcast at some point. But we were able to get his input on some of these questions that we asked. So again, hopefully one day we can get on his busy schedule and he can give us some live input. But we asked 3 questions and we'll summarize them and give our thoughts on them today just as part of our bonus episode because again, these are just perspectives that we can't provide on our own as players. The first question we asked was, what makes a player stand out to coaches beyond just raw talent or athleticism? The second question we asked was, how can athletes follow up after a camp in a way that's genuine and not pushy?
And the third question is, if a family is on a limited budget, how should they decide which camps to prioritize?
And we got some really good input on these questions because I think for the most part, we were pretty on theme with our previous episodes and the things that we talked about. But we definitely didn't hit on some of the key details that perhaps a coach sees that we can't. And even Roy is a player who helped coach some of these ID camps. It's harder to see from that point of view than from an actual coach's point of view.
Yeah, there's definitely some kind of like small but very important pieces that I guess we hadn't fully thought through.
Yeah. So let's talk about the first one. So, what makes a player stand out to coaches beyond just raw talent or athleticism? What Chris had to say was that most college coaches will say it's not one specific thing, but someone who impacts a game when they're watching. We tend to look for players who have a special attribute that could be mentality traits like work rate or competitiveness or ability traits on the ball. And that's sort of a paraphrase version of it, but pretty much what that's hitting on is just a lot of the times you're not going to be the most technical person on the field. It's what makes you a very well-rounded player that stands out.
Yeah, and I think we definitely touched on this in the past too, but we actually had two guys who made the team while I was there from ID camps. They both came from kind of farther out areas, so I don't think they had as good of natural scouting in their areas. So going to the ID camp was huge, and they were both super, I wouldn't say aggressive, but very active and demanding players. And I think this definitely is what helped them stand out. And it's actually what our coach told us because he told us the stories about what he saw in them and when they were at the camps. And it was just the desire to win and the kind of overall competitiveness that made them stand out over just pure talent or athleticism.
Right, work ethic for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah, and to give another perspective, I'm sure or I know, I mean, I've spoken to Chris about this myself, is I had been communicating with him and I think perhaps some of the other coaching staff for a while before I went to the ID camp. But the reason I went to the ID camp is because I had built some of that relationship beforehand. And when I went to the ID camp, I think that was definitely the environment where I guess I sealed the deal at
Mhm.
that point. So I think a lot of the times that's a great space to continue to build a relationship and showcase your character beyond the game in the field. So that's from my personal experience as well. But I think you gave a really great example.
Yeah, I think, I guess, just making an impact and really being someone that kind of stands out in the game is something you want for good reasons,
Yeah,
obviously.
of course. Moving on to the second question, we asked, how can athletes follow up after a camp in a way that's genuine and not pushy? And before we talk about the answer to that one, I think we brought that up because it's really tricky to get a hold of a coach in a way
Mhm.
that sounds genuine, right? Like you heard my email. Before that, I was also saying that I was interested in their academic programs, which were very unique and interesting to me. That obviously doesn't necessarily give off a personal touch, right?
Right. Yeah. I think one thing that we both kind of agreed on was some putting something in your email that is specific to them. And so it actually feels like it is genuine. It's not just a copy paste template.
Yeah, and it's really hard because you are very young and you don't really know
Yeah.
how to handle those conversations without some guidance. So, for anyone out there who's listening, here's some guidance for you. What Chris had to tell us was that the best follow up is often through your club or high school coach, especially before direct recruiting contact is allowed. Otherwise, a short thank you email mentioning something specific about the camp is a really great touch. And I think I agree with that a lot. Like, I don't think I ever called out one specific thing or experience that stuck with me or that I observed, or maybe even a piece of feedback, and a positive piece of feedback that's well received by the coaching staff or the school. I think that that adds that personalized touch from you as a player, as opposed to, like Rory, you said, the copy paste template.
Right. Yeah, and I think it also shows the coach that there's some like your understanding of the game is there if you call out a specific drill or something that happened while you played, as well as something like how you really enjoyed the tour or something like that. It kind of gives you a good like middle ground of showing, okay, this person likes the school and they're also very in tune with what happened when they were playing.
Yeah, or maybe even calling out something from a player that you met or something they
Yeah,
told you
no,
or an
definitely.
experience that they gave you. I feel like that's definitely a very intentional way to communicate with a coach rather than just saying, "Here's my schedule. See you at the next tournament," kind of thing. I
Yeah.
mean, you heard my email. I can give another, I'm sure I can give plenty of examples, but I feel like that's one good example of, well, one, I was young and inexperienced, but
Mhm.
two, definitely some copy paste in there.
I think another very important part in this quote that we hadn't really touched on before was going through your club or high school coach.
Yes. And I think we'll definitely, the next question also for sure touches on that too. But I think you bring up a great point. I think having that supportive relationship and that supportive figure from the club coach side or even your high school coach is a huge asset, because we have been mentioning that there's a date, a cutoff date where you can communicate or not communicate with the college coaches that you're reaching out to. We had said September 1st, but we stand corrected. The rules have changed. It's in June now of your sophomore year.
Yeah, so summer going into your junior year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think having someone who can vouch for you, kind of like a sponsor,
Yeah.
is huge, because you can't actually communicate with said college coach until you've reached that time period. So that's definitely a lot of time lost that you want to make sure that you're still building up your rep before you can even formally speak to the coach.
Yeah, so you get that, you get kind of a head start on talking to the coach. And a lot of the time a lot of these coaches will know each other or have met each other before, so it's already kind of a trusted relationship sometimes, or just coach to coach, kind of like same job, same environment that they're usually in can help a lot as well.
Yeah, it's definitely all a huge network, and I
Mhm.
think a club coach can make or break you.
Oh,
And so,
definitely.
yeah, I think we talked about this in an earlier episode, and we'll definitely deep dive. But watching out for those red or green flags when you're in your club team or your high school team, and just making sure that you're taking the time, if your aspiration or your athlete's aspiration is to play at the next level, you definitely want to have a good relationship that provides that support throughout the recruiting journey.
Mhm.
All right. Moving on to our third question that we asked. We said, if a family is on a limited budget, how should they decide which camps to prioritize? I also will say that I think this question can apply with or without the budget piece.
Yeah, no, definitely.
How can you prioritize the camp,
Yeah,
right?
because even if, like, it's not a budget piece, it's still a waste of time if it's just a camp that's completely useless for you.
Yeah, and I think it's just worth, I mean, again, unless you really don't mind spending all of your time and money on all of the camps across the nation, I think it's important to prioritize them because, I mean, if you are in school, you probably won't even have the time, even if you
Right.
do have the money, right? So it is important to prioritize and be realistic with which camps you are trying to get to because there are so many and you will get a ton. I mean, we when we were looking through examples, email examples, we were looking through just a ton of archives of just blast emails that we got sent to or we got sent from these college camps advertising their ID camps. And I think perhaps for some who may not be familiar with the process, you might think, oh, this is great. This is their way of reaching out to me. I'm going to go. But I think a lot of the time, those are just ways to get you out there and you have to pay for the residential camp and you have to spend your time there and pay for the travel. So that was definitely, I guess, eye-opening because perhaps at the time we might have thought, "Oh, great, we're getting another email from this college that's sending all these cool PowerPoints and ads to me."
Yeah, going through those completely triggered an old memory. But I think I was in some sort of college recruiting portal kinda thing,
I think I
and so
was
my
too.
my email was out there, and
Yeah,
so then you just get these, like, mass kind of general
the
emails.
auto
They're
emails, yeah.
hitting you with the copy and paste email now.
Yeah.
So I like, the ones where they mention your name and say, like, "Hey, we saw you at this game or that game," those are gold. You really wanna prioritize those.
Yeah. So, from Chris's perspective, if you're on a budget, talk to your coach about what level you should be looking at and focus on schools that make sense. Local camps are a good starting point, but for out of state ones, make sure there's a realistic connection or interest first. End quote. And I think the key thing in this answer is once again, your coach, whether that's high school or club, and then also the realistic connection slash interest slash already established communication channels with the college itself.
Yeah, I think one really good point he makes there is highlighting the out of state ones. The in state ones are a great place to kind of load up and go to a lot of them because
Mhm.
they're you're not going to have to pay for travel or anything like that, and so you'll be able to go and you'll your chances of meeting that coach and being around them is so much higher just because the chance of them going to local games is super high. But out of state where you have to travel. It's a huge time commitment for you and your athlete. That is when you really want to be intentional and make sure there is some bond already created there.
Yes. Or if you know that it's one of those multi school
Yep.
camps and you know the school that you've been already communicating with is going to be there, even if it's not at their specific university, if you know that they're going to be there watching you, that is definitely a good opportunity.
Yeah. Or if it's a multi camp and there's like 5 schools that you really want to go to, I would say that's also a good thing to consider as well.
Yes, exactly. And I think the biggest takeaway for this question is just strategy matters much more than volume. Like,
Yeah. And asking your club coach or high school coach for suggestions on level and schools is a great place to start because you're getting a non-biased opinion
mhm.
of somebody who watches you day in and day out. So if anyone's going to know your level and your understand your commitment and kind of what you want to do and also a good understanding of the college game, that is a great place to start.
Yes, that's a great point because going back to that relationship with your club coach or your high school coach or your athlete's high school or club coach, you really want to make sure that it's a transparent, trustworthy situation because a lot of the times, or sometimes actually, I won't generalize, sometimes coaches just won't have the athlete's best interests. there's other external factors, other things, moving pieces in the situation that might deter the coach from making the right decision that's in your athletes or your best interest. So it's definitely important to establish those open conversations early on. And again, that's, when you're actively reflecting on the club you're at, the high school you're at, whether you want to go the next level, making sure that you have those supportive relationships around you that will help you achieve your personal goals for what you personally want to do post college, post high school, whatever that might be.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, those were our three questions. We obviously had a very big list of questions that we wanted to ask, but only so many can be answered at once. And we really just wanted to make this bonus episode because we felt that this was just an important add on to what we have already talked about, and once again, a perspective that we just can't give as well as an actual college coach. And this is also the idea behind Path to Play, is just bringing in all sorts of perspectives from any sport. So I think we'll slowly start to integrate some of these small interviews, live interviews. If anyone has any feedback or connections or people that you want to share their perspective on here, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we love adding new people and their perspectives in because it just gives us a lot more to think about and a lot more content for you guys and content that is, I guess, hard to obtain.
Yes. So, again, as always, hopefully this episode gave you a little bit more clarity, confidence about your own goals or your athlete's goals. And huge thank you to Chris for answering our questions so very insightfully. We will definitely have him on in a future episode.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this bonus episode. Stay tuned for next week.